What's good, Relocation Football League fans? It's your boy Smitty here with Bill, as always, with our RFL weekly podcast covering everything that happened in the past week and, of course, what's going to be coming up this week, which actually starts today. So after this podcast, we'll have a game shortly afterwards, starting up at 6 p.m. Eastern, which is less than 3 hours from now. So we're going to try to get through this quickly. And, as always, Bill, glad to have you here.
What's up, everybody?
And so let's go ahead and jump into our usual things here. We're going to go ahead and recap. First, let's actually recap the Premier games first, because I had to put these on a separate post here. And then there's a couple of graphics I couldn't get to in time, so I had to make what I could at the moment. And so this is what I did right here: is a display of all the Premier games that happened this week. And we had ourselves a pretty decent game, outcome here. You can see close games. The Gunners, you were able to defeat the Gunners 27-20. The Diablos beating the Monarchs, 31-20. Lancers getting a crazy win. The Desperados just edging the Tigers. The Dreadnoughts and the Black Knights really went at in that game. Same deal with the Voyagers and Bulldogs. So me just going down that list and you guys seeing the final score, so I don't have to reiterate these. Bill, I'm gonna just leave it up to you. Break down each of these games, and we'll move on to the primetime game afterwards.
All right. Well, first game, of course, it's a game with my team, the Explorers, and the Gunners. I thought it was just a good back-and-forth game. Jabri and Latavian seemed to battle each other throughout the day, and it was close up until the end, and then two interceptions by my defense were really the difference in this game. They were able to hold off the Gunners' comeback, and hats off to Landolt and Irvin Roy for that crazy end zone sequence for the second interception. Diablos and the Monarchs, that was a good game. I was happy to see the Diablos sort of get back on track and get a good win. The game went exactly how I expected it to. I assumed that Diablos would pull it out. I like what Rashad Duncan did, but that guy's got to hold on to the football. I think he had 2 fumbles in that game. They got to be able to limit that if they want to try to, piece together a few wins here. And then for the Lancers and the Marshals, that was a crazy game to watch. Hats off to John Copey with that crazy time expiring kick return for the win. And the Lancers, I think they sweep the Marshals now at this point. I think they've played both games.
Yep.
So hats off to the Lancers. Tigers and Desperados. This one was pretty interesting to me. I think a lot of people expected the Desperados to win this handedly, but I really like what the Tigers have been doing, and they were able to keep in it most of the game with the Desperados. And at the end, Desperados just, had a little bit more talent, but I really like what I'm seeing with Coach Wizenard there in Chicago. Black Knights and the Dreadnoughts. Another good game. Entertaining. Big plays on both sides of the ball. This one was just a really interesting game to watch. Big plays, and the Dreadnoughts pulled it out again at the end. I like what I see from them, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the Voyagers and the Bulldogs. Where is that? And this, again, was another good matchup. We had a lot of really good games this weekend. I really liked the layout, and I liked how these games played out. Really entertaining to watch. But this one, I was happy to see that the Voyagers were able to put together a win. That play by Darren Jameson, that forced fumble on Matt Wheaton, and then picked it up and took it to the house, man. That was a good game, a good play. That was probably one of my favorite ones of the week, aside from that kick return. But yeah, Voyagers just pounced on them after that. It sort of took the wind out of their sail, and they just never really looked back.
Yeah, so, like you said, great slate of games. We started out, I'm going to go ahead and break down the same games here. Your game against the Gunners was great. For a second, it looked like the Gunners were going to be able to come back and tie the game up to send it into overtime, but the clutchness of Jabri Jackson just could not come in time and get it done, so they ended up falling 27-20 to you. But it was a great game plan by both of you guys. I'm really liking to see the changes that Coach James have made over there for Houston. It looks like the Gunners are better and have looked better and have performed better slightly a bit offensively these past 2 weeks. As for the Marshals, I said the Marshals, same thing he did. The Monarchs and the Diablos game. The Diablos, of course, heavy favorites to win that one, and they got the job done. The Diablos, like you said, I like the way they ran the football. Got to take care of it, though, but hopefully this boosts up that momentum for the Diablos later on throughout this game. As I said, an amazing game we got to see for the division in the NFC South as the OKC Lancers were able to best the San Antonio Marshals in home run fashion with a crazy kick return touchdown at the end of the game when the clock was expiring by John Copey, the rookie, having his biggest play, of course, of his season. They don't really utilize him much, but interesting to see, if they're going to go forward with keeping him there on kick return. I'm pretty sure he's going to stay there after that game, but a big win for them. Like you said, I've been very impressed with the Chicago Tigers ever since Coach Wizenard has taken them over. It seems like a lot of their games that they are expected to win, they're not losing by expected to lose. They're not losing by much. They've been in really close games ever since he's been able to take over, and you can see right there with the Desperados, no slouch team, just a 6-point deficit. They lost by 29-23, but they were within that game throughout the whole way. Their defense has been playing good, and I think this is a team that is looking to be something special, I think, in the future with that coach there. But a good win there for the Desperados. Moving on, the Dreadnoughts able to get it done, staying undefeated in RFL play. We'll talk more about them later on. They defeated the Black Knights 24-17. As for the Voyagers, they were able to best the Bulldogs, which I was kind of impressed with. The Voyagers, honestly, as everyone who's been following the RFL knows, a sleeper team. They always seem to upset teams at the moment that you least expect it, and they had a big solid win there against the Bulldogs and Coach Reed over there. So that was a great group of games there. I do have the other primetime game, the premier game, that aired during that was commentated by Jeff, but I'll actually be throwing that into the premier games when we break down those. And that's going to be the games that we're going to get into right now. So looking at the premier games, we're going to start out with the Crusaders and the Steamers game. This was the game that started out the week, and oh my goodness, it was a barn burner. I don't know why I have the arrow on the Crusaders points as if they won. They were far from victory in that one. They got absolutely manhandled. Final score ended up being 57-29. What's your takeaways from that one?
Yeah, actually, a huge bounce back for the Steamers. So I know that they had a tough one last week. It was just a shootout, really. And, at the end of the day, I say this a lot, a lot of these teams are so high-powered on offense, it comes down to which one of the defenses can step up. And I think the defensive talent and the playmaking ability of the Steamers' defense was just that much better than the Crusaders. And the Steamers kept piling it on. The Crusaders couldn't keep up. And, yeah, just a great day for the Steamers on offense.
Yeah, it was a great game. I really liked the way that both of the offenses came up, but of course, at first, you would think coming into this game, you don't want to get into a shootout, and not many teams can beat the Crusaders in a shootout, but the Steamers did exactly that. Just absolutely kept relentless pressure on offense, moving down the field, making big plays, scoring, getting everybody the football, and the Crusaders were not prepared for that, especially their defense. They gave up a lot of big plays after another, but of course that was kind of expected. As for the Steamers, as you talked about with their defense stepped up in crunch time, to be honest, and they did a pretty good job against the Crusaders as they were able to hold them off for a couple of drives and ended up winning the game, by a huge margin. They really separated in the second half, and you could see, man, Ben Wakefield and Elijah Bentley, that show didn't stop, but they still took the loss as they could not establish a decent enough running game. Well, the running game was actually decent, but they didn't run the ball often, and they just at some points just couldn't score. So that's what it came down to, and big shout out to the Steamers for that performance and getting that victory. Moving on to the next game that we had following that was on Twitch. It was the Oklahoma City Bisons, who are still winless in play in the RFL, taking on the Riverhogs. The Riverhogs were able to get it done by a pretty big margin, winning by 19. Final score ended up being 37-18. What's your takeaways from this?
Yeah, I think the Riverhogs just had a day, man. The Bison's defense is hurting right now, and you can see it in their games. They're having a hard time just about stopping anybody, and I know that it's been a down year for them, but, man, Mackey and Shivers just did what they wanted today, and that's exactly what the Riverhogs need to do, especially with losing Sylvester Leach last week or maybe the week before. They looked like it didn't stop them at all. It didn't slow them down at all, and yes, a really impressive win by the Riverhogs.
Yeah, a lot of big things. I wanted to talk about, I wish I could have added this to the podcast, but I guess I can add it now, about the Oklahoma City Bisons. Wasn't necessarily, well, they're going to be starting now Joseph Torres at the quarterback position. I've seen a lot of people react to that. I had over 200 likes on the Instagram post on that. And so, you can already tell that people who are rallying or watching OKC Bison's games, they've kind of been waiting for this moment. But honestly, I could say their woes did not come from the quarterback position with Devin Hobart at the helm. And, I spoke with Coach Ethan, and pretty much, as I treat coaches here, pretty much like a GM and a coach at the same time. So, we pretty much make sure that we keep the teams intact and try to make sure that we go about the future of the team the right way. So I wanted to go ahead and make sure that Devin Hobart got his opportunity to play because, he did well, to be honest, this season. It's just the fact that now they know they're not going to have any chances, to be honest, to play in any playoff games or anything of that nature. This season's pretty much shot for them. And so at that point, I talked with Coach Ethan and I told him, I said, hey, I think it's time now to go ahead and throw throw Torres in there just for the experience and the development for next year, because it could be a potential quarterback battle for next season between those two, because Hobart does have a season left on his contract. So not sure how that's going to go, but at least you're going to be able to see what Joseph Torres brings to the table for the second half of the season. With that being said, he did well in this game. You can see no turnovers, 2 touchdowns. 26 of 32. I mean, he handled business, but they just could not, come up, finish, and win the game. Antoine Davis had himself a pretty solid game with those 2 touchdowns that Hobart were able to throw. But like you said, Hunter Mackey and Dre Shivers just handled business. I mean, you could see that close to 300 yards passing for Mackey, and Shivers just ran all over the defense. And, of course, problems continue for OKC as their defense, they're missing one of the most crucial parts of your defense, and that's depth at the linebacker. Ever since they lost their 2 linebackers, this defense has just not been able to perform and stop offenses at all, and that just was a go-to for the Riverhawks to attack that defense with the run game up the middle. There's just no way they could stop it, and you can see Dre Shivers had himself a day with 142 yards rushing and a rushing touchdown, and the receivers, of course, with Hunter Mackey was just going off. So a big game for the Riverhawks and a tough position for the Bisons. But we'll see what happens in the future. We already know, this might just be one of those tank years for them. Moving on to the next game, we had a division rivalry matchup here between the Cougars and the Aviators. The Cougars were able to get it done in Columbus as they were able to break even at 3-3. Final score was 36-19. What do you guys say about this game?
Yeah, I'm not too surprised by this. I knew the Cougars are a very talented team, and I'm actually just as surprised as anybody else is about the 3-3 record. They just had some really tough breaks and some tough losses, and I just think that now with a good win against the Aviators, I think they can maybe put that together for next week and the week after. But what a great day. Slater was just on point. Locker gets over 100 yards. Henderson and Lyons were just all over the place. Just a phenomenal day on offense for the Cougars, and hopefully it helps them move forward and get some momentum going.
Yeah, like you said, shocked to see the record with the improvement coming into this season at the Cougars. There was a lot of hype around the Chicago Cougars coming into this season. 3-3 record. It looks bad, but it really isn't. You think about their 3 losses, the team that they lost to. First game, they ended up losing to, I believe it was the Red Dragons. So they lost to the Red Dragons, they lost to the Celtic Tigers, and then they lost to the Bulls. Those are 3 powerhouse AFC teams who are like tops right now in their division and, are just powerhouse teams that are difficult to beat. One of them, of course, being the Bulls in their same division that is up ahead of every one of their division opponents by 4 games. So, those are tough losses right there, tough matchups, but they win the games that they were expected to win. So they're 3-3. This is definitely a game they were expected to win, and they handled business. As you said, Slater with over 300 yards. They started out the game hot. The first play of the game was a long 78-yard touchdown run by Denard Locker. And, this you could already tell in my eyes, even from commentating the game, that, this game was most likely going to be over from the rip. The fact they started out like that. Contavious Henderson and London Lions were making huge plays through the air. And just seems like this Aviators defense just had no chance of really stopping them. So, a big game right there for the Cougars. Moving on to the next game, we had the Bulls. Speaking of them, the only undefeated team right now in the RFL that continues to push, had themselves I guess you could say, a light matchup here with the Pioneers, who used to be a divisional rivalry. And not to mention, the Pioneers I mean, they beat the Bulls last season and tied with them. So they never lost to the Bulls last season, and the Bulls came back with a vengeance with a nice win here, 34-16. What do you guys say about that game?
Yeah, at the beginning, it almost seemed as if the Pioneers might be able to do that again this year because it seemed to be in the first quarter they weren't, they weren't that bad. They weren't getting pounded. I think they were actually the first to score a touchdown, or maybe I'm mistaken, but they looked halfway decent in the first. But then the Bulls, they just pulled ahead, and they did what we expected them to. Kearney was just phenomenal today, and he he just did whatever he wanted. That was 29-32, 324 yards and 4 touchdowns. You can't get much better than that out of a quarterback, and there was no chance the Pioneers were going to be able to stop that if they couldn't get him to throw more than 3 incompletions.
Yeah, it was definitely a tough break for the Pioneers. Of course, looking at their schedule, honestly, they have one of the toughest schedules this season in the RFL, and we're going to definitely work next season to address that. Me and Bill and the CU's been talking about making sure that we got the right matchups. But of course, not a good year for the Pioneers for that reason. It looks like this might be a season where they might not win a game. I mean, they got nothing but tough opponents for the rest from here on, and the Bulls are definitely one of them. And, it seemed close in the beginning, but of course, I did feel the Bulls at some point were going to pull away, and they did just that. Lane Kearney literally only missed 3 passes. He won AFC Offensive Player of the Week also in that game with 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. And, of course, Jones going off on the ground over 100 yards rushing, and Zach Freeney. I think they lost their receiver, didn't they? I think they lost. It wasn't Zach Freeney, but Griffin Kashama. Yeah, so they lost Kashama in that game. So that's tough. But Zach Freeney, I mean, he's a beast as well. But of course, going to be interesting to see what they do further on throughout this season with that key piece missing. But with that being said, moving on to the next game, we had the Toronto Thunderbirds barely squeak out a victory over, at the time, the suspended Snowhawks. They're finally off of suspension, which we'll talk more about that later on in this podcast. But I couldn't believe it for a second. It looked like the Snowhawks were going to win this game. Going into the fourth, it was 14-3, and I thought it was over for the Thunderbirds, but they were able to rally back with 14 unanswered points and win it 17-14. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, not a very fun game or easy game to watch if you're a Thunderbirds coach, fan, whatever it is. Because this was a rough one, and like you said, up until the fourth quarter, it looked like the Snowhawks were just gonna shut down the Thunderbirds offense completely. Luckily, they pulled some magic out of their hat and pulled it out in the end. But yeah, just a sloppy game for the Thunderbirds, and to be honest, it might be something really good for the Snowhawks, even though they lost, to get that a solid game out of these backups before the starters come back. So I mean, who knows, maybe it gives the Snowhawks a little boost before next week.
Yeah, LC3, I would have to say, came out very flat. A lot of missed passes. I remember at the start of the game, you could tell something was wrong with him, was a little bit off, and he wasn't the only one. Cornell Mickens kind of struggled a little bit, but I think that was mainly because of the Snowhawks defense. They really did a great job in shutting down the run game. You could tell they keyed in on that aspect of the offense. But with that being said, I felt like that loss that they took the week before from the Barons kind of affected them in a way where you could see that the players kind of just were not, as I was saying, playing up to the expectation that you thought they would, and they almost ended up losing that game. And the opposite of the Pioneers, the Thunderbirds have more of a weaker schedule this season, and so the Thunderbirds, when you think about this team, they definitely, with this schedule, seem like they're definitely going to be a playoff team, and they got a good record right now, 5-1, almost could have been 4-2, but the Thunderbirds, I mean, it makes you wonder after a game like this, are these guys going to be able to, sustain if they make it to the playoffs, and how long will they last? Usually, if they make it to the playoffs, they go all the way at least to the NFC Championship game. But we're going to have to see how that affects. I mean, that was a close game. They have had close games in the past, and of course, there were some fluke games. This could have been that. But going back to this game in particular, the Snowhawks did a great job on defense. Got to give nothing but hats off to their defense. They played perfect. The offense, they tried what they could against a very tough Thunderbirds defense, and Casey Chris actually didn't look too bad. For a minute he did, but I would have to say there was a couple of plays that he did miss out on. There was one pass across the middle of the field where he had the tight end wide open and missed it, and I think that play, if he had connected on that pass, they probably would have won the game, but they didn't. But still, I got to give hats off to the Snowhawks. Like you said, I think it's going to give them momentum heading into this week, especially with their suspended players returning. And for the last game that we had of primetime in the RFL, we had the Toronto Huskies take on the Red Dragons. And as expected, this game ended up being defensive in favor of the Red Dragons. I did think that the Huskies were going to be able to pull away with this game, but their offense did struggle against that tough Red Dragons defense. And again, the Red Dragons hold a team to under 20 points and win it 20-12.
Yeah, I said this last week. You didn't want to agree with me. You didn't want to, but I told you if there was any team that the Red Dragons were going to be able to maybe put enough offense into and take out the victory, it would be against the Huskies because they've just been struggling, and it happened. The Red Dragons defense shut it down. Hudson had almost 300 yards passing, but no touchdowns. The ground game was gone. They couldn't get Guyton in the game. It was just an all-around dominant performance by the Red Dragons defense. And on top of it, they got, I think, one of the better performances out of Anthony Savoy so far this year as a quarterback, throwing the ball for him. And I said it myself. The Huskies defense is not as top tier as their offense. And I thought that this was a good chance for Savoy to maybe get a little comfortable and explore his passing talent a little bit more. And he did that, and they pulled it out. Good game for the Red Dragons.
Yeah, did pretty solid throwing the football. 20 of 26. He's been like really low in the averages in terms of throwing the football when you compare him to the rest of the quarterbacks. But like you said, a very good performance by the rookie. He did well also on the ground, but over 200 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, had the 1 blemish with the interception. But for the most part, the offense stayed afloat like they wanted to, like they wanted them to. And this team kind of reminds me of the 1999 or 2000 Ravens when they were just shutting down teams defensively and their offense was terrible. But, as long as they scored like 10 points, they were going to win the game. It's kind of the same vibe you get right here this season with the Red Dragons as, they handle a pretty good offensive powerhouse team with their Huskies, even though they have been struggling. And the biggest factor to me, which kind of got me saying, like, man, this Red Dragons defense is looking like the Season 2 defense. It looks like they could be a contender this year because look at what they did to the run game. Corey Leonidas literally had 12 carries for 15 yards. And, of course, the Huskies offensive line was playing pretty good up until this game. Of course, going up against this tough defensive front of the Red Dragons. They got blown by, gave up quite a few sacks, and Hudson and the offense just couldn't get it going. So a big win right there for Coach Davis and the Red Dragons. Moving on from that, we're going to go ahead and get a look at this upcoming week's schedule. A little bit shorter as we have a total. I did?
Yeah.
What game? Oh, wow. Yeah. So that was supposed to be up earlier. Wow. Okay. So, yeah. Whoa. I didn't even throw that in here. Let me get that in here real fast because I know I literally just made the graphic for that. Wow. I can't believe I forgot it. You should be able to see it now, though. Okay. Let's recap this game. That's like the biggest game of the week. I can't believe I skipped that. But the Celtic Tigers, man, took their first loss to the Orlando Sentinels. Hats off to Coach Armstrong. They fought out to earn this victory. And for a second, I was like, man, the Celtic Tigers definitely got this one. I think they're, in the fourth quarter, they get it done. But it was the opposite. The Sentinels were able to force turnovers and make it happen to win this game. 3 interceptions on Drake Crowell, man. I was shocked by the performance. They ended up defeating the Celtic Tigers 37-27.
Yeah, this game was a great one to watch, and hats off to Armstrong. He did great against the Celtic Tigers, a team that nobody thought could be beat, and they made Drake Royal look very uncomfortable, and just some very clutch moments by that defense in the secondary to come out and stop the GOAT in his tracks at the end of the game. Personally, this was my favorite game of the week just because it's, the two historically good franchises in the RFL going at each other. And the Sentinels have sort of been, up and down sometimes. The Celtic Tigers are unstoppable, and for the Sentinels to come out and say, "Hey, we're still here," that was fun to watch.
Yeah, that was a great game, man, and it definitely helped them out there as a topic we'll be talking about more in the AFC East as the Sentinels moved to 2-5, and the Celtic Tigers just a game ahead of them at 6-1. So they're going to play next week against each other again. So that's definitely a big game that everyone, I'm pretty sure, is going to be looking forward to. But I was so impressed by that defense forcing those big turnovers on Drake Crowell. He had 3 interceptions, not to mention a forced fumble, which they recovered. I believe they scored. If not, they got into scoring range, and they ended up punching it in, something of that nature. Couldn't remember quite off the top of my head, but the Sentinels defense came ready to play. DeAndre Wilkins Jr. came ready to play. The offenses looked like they did everything they had to do to win the game against a very solid team. And I think they just caught Drake Crowell by surprise. You could tell also by in the red zone, 2 of 5 when it comes to touchdowns in the red zone for the Celtic Tigers. And that's something you rarely see. This is usually a team, when they get in the red zone, they finish. And the Sentinels defense looking like that Season 3 defense, keeping them out and getting the victory here. So it was a big win, man. Glad you had me go back and recap that game. Can't believe I forgot it.
Yeah, no, what you doing over there?
But back to, I just realized I didn't even have it in the graphics, so that's why I forgot about it. Thought it would pop up. But this is the Week 8 schedule that we got coming up. Shorter games, just a total of 9 games this week. We're only going to have 3 premier games, which honestly I think is a good thing because you'll be able to single in on one game as they'll all be at different times on Saturday. But we start out the week, we have the Lancers taking on the Desperados, and that game is literally after this podcast at 6 p.m. Eastern tonight. And that battle will be for the NFC South, I believe, because right now the Marshals, they're 5-2. The Lancers are 6-1, and the Desperados are 5-1. So I feel that if the Desperados win that game, I think they move to the top of the division. Am I right about that? Do you think that's right?
I believe so, because
they have less losses, right?
Yeah, they have less losses. Yeah, and even if they have one game less than the Lancers, they still beat them. So they should go to the top. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big game right there. Second week in a row, the OKC Lancers will be fighting to compete for the top of the NFC South. So that's a huge game right there. And like I said, that game's coming up in literally 2.5 hours from now. So that's going to be a great one to watch. Following that game today, it will be the Condors taking on the Crusaders again. That was a close matchup. The Condors just lost to the Crusaders in that last matchup. I think it was 27-23. I believe, yep. 27-23 was the final score of that game. Rematch here. Let's see if the Condors can change that. But that game will be at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. And the 3 primetime premier games for tomorrow, this is kind of out of order here. Well, not tomorrow, but for Saturday, will be the Shamrocks versus the Diablos. That's going to be the first game at 1 p.m. Eastern. Then it's going to be at 4 p.m. Eastern, the Armadillos versus the Celtic Tigers. And at 8 p.m. Eastern, with Jeff calling the game for primetime, it will be the Gunners versus the Monarchs. And speaking of primetime, I do want to make an announcement. Oh, I'll make an announcement later, but we do have another potential commentator coming to the group. So just want to go ahead and put that out there. So hopefully we'll get some more commentated on games for those premier games. But moving back to the primetime games on Sunday, we have the Cougars taking on the Conquistadors. And following that game on Twitch, the Snowhawks versus the Tigers, back from suspension. So that's going to be a big game. Interesting to see how that's going to turn out. And then to finish out on Monday, we have the Aviators taking on the Bulls and the Elks taking on the Thunderbirds. So give me who you think is going to win these games and why, and which game are you most interested in watching after your predictions.
Well, so let's go right on down the list here. The first game is tonight's game, Lancers at Desperados. This one was a toss-up to me because both teams have been performing really well. But I'm going to go Desperados here for 2 reasons. 1, they're at home. And 2, they're a top 10 passing offense, and they're going up against the worst passing defense in the NFC right now. So I'm going to take the Desperados in this one. I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout. I think it'll be a close one. But, yeah, Desperados. As for the second game, Condors at Crusaders, I have to go Crusaders. The Condors just can't seem to figure it out. Sorry, Nick, but they just can't figure it out this season, and now they just gave away their best player on the team. I know he wasn't a scheme fit, they didn't use him, but they're obviously not, something's not gelling there. And the Crusaders, I think, are going to bounce back after last week, and I think Wakefield's going to find Bentley probably like 3 or 4 times in the end zone or something. Gunners, I almost went backwards. Shamrocks at Diablos is the first one, and I'm going to go Diablos. I've been cheering for the Shamrocks, but I really like what the Diablos have been doing. I like Coach Warden's plan and what he's been able to accomplish so far, and I think last week's just going to give them enough momentum to put it together again. If they can limit the turnovers, I think they pull out the W against the Shamrocks. The Armadillos and the Celtic Tigers, I'm going to go Celtic Tigers. I don't see them dropping back-to-back games, and I think they're going to come out with a vengeance after last week. And now the Gunners and the Monarchs. I'm going to go Gunners. It's a favorable matchup, obviously. The Monarchs have quite a bit not going their way this year, and the Gunners are sort of finding their rhythm. So I think they're going to end up pulling this one out for the win. And then we have the Cougars at the Conquistadors. I'm going to go Cougars. I just think they found a stride last week, and I think that they're going to be able to put it together and keep that momentum going through the next few weeks. So Cougars on the road. And then Snowhawks and Tigers. I would love to see Coach Wizenard win a game and get the Tigers ahead of the Snowhawks here. I just don't know with all those stars returning if the Snowhawks are going to let that happen. So I'm going to have to go with the Snowhawks here, but you never know. You never know. And then for the Aviators and the Bulls, I just think the Bulls are going to stay undefeated in this one. The Aviators have been all over the place. They can't seem to put anything together, and the Bulls are on a roll right now. So Bulls are going to take that one. And the last game, the Elks at the Thunderbirds. I'm pretty sure the Thunderbirds are going to win this one. We've seen the Elks struggle this season, and the Thunderbirds have a bad taste in their mouth after last week. That's the best way I can put it. I think they come out, and I think they win this one without question.
So good predictions right there. My predictions, going back, of course, to OKC and Austin, I'd have to say and agree with you that the Desperados, I think they will win it with the home field advantage. And there's not really too much to say about that. I just think it will be a good game, real close, but I feel like the Desperados just may figure out a way to score more points than the Lancers would. So it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out, because really it could go either way, but I'm going to just go with the Desperados for that reason. The next game, the Condors and the Crusaders. I got the Crusaders winning that one. It was a close game last time. I honestly don't feel like it will be too close this time around, especially with them having home field advantage and Elijah Bentley and Wakefield. I agree with you. I think they will have themselves a field day with this defense, and so it should be a win there for the Crusaders. The Gunners and Monarchs, I'm going with I'm going to just go in order anyway. The Gunners and the Monarchs, I feel the Gunners are going to defeat the Monarchs. I don't think that the Monarchs really have too much of a chance of winning any games this season either. So that's tough there. I know Coach Shepard is there. He's going to probably feel some type of way when he hears this. But the Gunners, I just don't feel that they're going to have what it takes to beat them, especially like how you said that they're starting to get themselves into a rhythm and play better offense. On the next game, I already know the outcome to that, so I'm not even going to say anything about that one. The Celtic Tigers and the Armadillos game. I'm going to go with the Celtic Tigers. I agree. I don't feel like the Celtic Tigers are going to drop 2 games. I feel like they're really going to do a pretty good job with the Armadillos. You really don't know what you get from the Armadillos, though, sometimes. Sometimes they have a really good game and upset you like how they did the Huskies, and then sometimes they come back and get blown out like how the Dreadnoughts did them the week afterwards. So I don't know how they're going to really be able to compete with the Celtic Tigers with an offense and a team that's just performing like that. I think the Celtic Tigers will get it done, especially with home field advantage. The Cougars and the Conquistadors, I think, will be a very interesting game. I just feel that the Cougars are going to come into Mexico City and get it done. As for the Snowhawks and the Tigers game, which is the game I'm really most interested in watching this week, and simply because of the returning players, I still do feel like the Tigers, with the way things have been going with Coach Wizenard, they might have a chance to beat the Snowhawks, but I don't feel it's going to happen. But it might. I won't be shocked if they do. But I'm gonna go with the Snowhawks for that reason, because the players are returning. But if they weren't, I think it would have been a win in the bag, and it could still be a win even with the players back. So I'm gonna just go with the Snowhawks just by a tad bit of a favorites. But going on to the next game, the Bulls, I do feel are going to remain undefeated. Knock off the Aviators. Aviators just not the team right now to be competing with powerhouse teams like the Bulls, so I don't think they'll get it done. And, of course, to finish out the week, I think the Thunderbirds will defeat the Elks. Not sure how the game would go. It depends on how the offense goes for the Thunderbirds. Either they're going to come out flat like they did against the Snowhawks with their suspended players this last week, or they're going to get things into gear and really move the ball on the Elks and win by a huge margin. But I'm going to just go with the Thunderbirds on that one. I already talked about which game I was most excited to see. Which game are you most excited to see out of this group?
I think 2 of them. One is actually tonight's game, the Lancers and the Desperados. I want to see that one. And the other one that I am interested in seeing is I want to see that Snowhawks and the Tigers game. See the Snowhawks get back to their full strength and see if the Tigers can sort of, defy the odds.
Yeah, I'm agree with you on that. And then also, I'll throw in one more game that I think might be great to watch this week, and that's the Celtic Tigers and Armadillos. I really do want to see how that game turns out. But moving on to, this is a new thing I added in the podcast too, Bill. Just a simple thing is about the trade of Ronnie Nickens, and I just want to simply ask you, how do you think he's going to perform for the Gunners, especially against a matchup against one of the worst teams right now in the RFL against the Monarchs? Do you think that he'll be a good fit for the Gunners offense, and do you think he'll have a great showing this week?
I think that Coach James has the offense, and of course he has the line as well to go along with it to sort of, take some of this pressure off of Jabri Jackson. And I think that if he runs the right stuff and puts Nickens in a good spot, I think he could be. He might be able to be one of the top backs in the league. He just needs the right system, and I think that was the most frustrating part for us watching in Sacramento. He just wasn't getting it done there. And I just think that with the right system, which the Gunners could have, because I like what they were running last week against me, if they continue to run a scheme like that, they might just have something good on their hands with Ronnie Nickens. So, yeah, I think he's going to be a great addition to the Houston Gunners. I think that's the one thing they've been missing as a running back that can sort of control the game himself.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, especially since Lester Gatson left last year. That was a huge piece of their team, and we talked about it on the last podcast on maybe that was a huge factor on why their team has not been performing the way that we have been accustomed to seeing them perform, is because of the run game just not being the way it was. And with Ronnie Nickens now coming to the group, I think he may change it up. I do feel that offense does cater to a back with his talents, and he may come back into stardom and be one of the top backs in the league again. Moving on, we have the new top 10 power rankings heading into week 8. And, of course, Bulls being the only undefeated team in the league. So they're at 1. At number 2 is the Dreadnoughts, because technically they are also undefeated at 6-1. And we have the Celtic Tigers after their loss dropping to 3. The Steamers at 4. Your team at 5. Lancers at 6. Desperados at 7. Barons at 8, Thunderbirds at 9, and the Sentinels, after their big win over the Celtic Tigers, move up to 10. What's your thoughts on this list?
I actually do think it's a pretty solid list. I understand why the Sentinels are ranked 10 just because of their record right now, but I do feel that they are a better team than the 10th best team in the league. Basically, I mean, that game last week against the Celtic Tigers said, like, hey, we are still a top team. The record doesn't show it yet, but I think by the end of the season they'll be a little bit higher. But aside from that, I pretty much agree with everything else.
Okay, so to harp off of what you were just saying, in feeling that the Sentinels were a top 10 team, looking at this list, who would you put them above and what ranking?
That's
like, how would you arrange this?
That's a tough one. I'd almost say to use these 10 teams right here and to try to change it, I might flop the Thunderbirds and the Sentinels. I could say, okay, the Sentinels, their record isn't there yet, but they're the Thunderbirds had sort of an off week last week. We've seen it before once in a while. I don't know, man. That's tough. The only thing I would feel comfortable with making is just a swap of 9 and 10 at this point.
Got you. Yeah, just good. Just wanted to ask that question. But moving on to the next topic, we have, I usually have like moving images and things like that with the topic, but unfortunately didn't have the time. That was a big reason on why we had to postpone the podcast to be a day later, and I still did not have the time to be able to get to the graphics. But what I will do is have pictures of the topic, of the teams, of the topics that we're talking about, and that is the Snowhawks. Of course, you see right here, number 8 is back. The Italian gunslinger Joseph Gidley is going to be leading the offense, back with Karis Curry, Keelan Linton. This offense is going to explode now, opposite of what they did to the start of this season. Still don't know yet because they haven't touched the field, but I'm pretty sure that this offense is going to be red hot against the Tigers. And so, I mean, with that being said, and the suspension now being lifted off of Portland, do you think that the Snowhawks, based off of how the division right now is performing, they are literally only 2 games under the Crusaders right now, who are 4-3. They're 4-3. The Snowhawks are 2-4. Yeah, that's why I was getting confused on 2-4. So with that being said, do you think there's still a high possibility that the Snowhawks could make the playoffs anyway?
I don't know. That's tough. I think the only way they make the playoffs is if the Crusaders melt down and can't hold their division lead, which is possible. It's only 2 games, but there's just a lot of good teams in the NFC this year, and I just feel like with them already having 4 losses, that's going to be really, really tough to overcome. Especially for, I mean, they could very easily beat a few of the teams that are ahead of them right now, but I just don't know if it's going to be enough to get them in the playoffs if they don't win the division. And I just don't know if they'll have enough time to make up for the lost first 8 weeks of the season. So I'm iffy on it. I know they have the talent to do it. That I have no doubt about. But I don't know if they have the time to make it happen.
Yeah, and I kind of do agree with you on that. The only thing I would have to say, the only thing that's going to stop these guys from still making the playoffs is the Crusaders. If Coach Bachagalupi can try to win as much as possible to keep his distance away from the Snowhawks, that's going to be a team punching their ticket into the playoffs, and the Snowhawks going to miss it for the first time in franchise history. So that's what it comes down to: is can the Crusaders stay ahead of the Snowhawks there in the NFC? But with that, we move on to the next, and that is about the Sentinels. They came off a huge win over the Celtic Tigers. And with that being said, do you feel that the Sentinels have a high possibility of winning the AFC East now after beating the Celtic Tigers and just being a game behind them?
I think we'll know that answer for sure. Is it next week they play again? No,
Yep.
I know it's not this week, but next week they play again. If they can beat the Celtic Tigers in their next matchup, I guarantee you the Sentinels are going to win the division, because I don't think the Tigers are going to fall off, and I also don't think the Sentinels are going to fall off either. I think they're going to keep churning out wins, and I think it's all going to come down to that division standing. And if they can win this week or the next week against them, I think they have a very, very good chance of winning the AFC East. But that's the only way. If they don't beat the Celtic Tigers next week, I don't see it happening. I don't think the Celtic Tigers are going to get caught that much for them to be able to sneak up with having 3 losses and still win the division this year.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Still, it's going to be tough, though. The only reason why I say it's going to be tough is because the Black Knights did lose 2 divisional games already. The Sentinels already did lose 2 divisional games already to the Black Knights. And, I guess that will be nullified between the two if the Sentinels can beat the Celtic Tigers twice, which is a huge shock. So, going to be interesting to see how that goes. And also, how will the Black Knights do against the Celtic Tigers is a huge question, because historically, the Celtic Tigers have struggled against the Black Knights. And so, if it does come to the point where the Sentinels do defeat the Celtic Tigers again, and the Celtic Tigers do maybe split or lose both games to the Black Knights, then I think that the Sentinels do have themselves a hot chance to be on top of the division. The next topic is about the Bulls, and we got Coach Melanishin's character here at the coach, and this is the only undefeated team in the RFL right now, technically. And with that being said, I want to ask, do you believe in the hype of the Bulls? Do you think this is going to be another, blow smoke year where they are a top team in the AFC, come into the playoffs and lose again like they did last season? Or do you think that this is a real deal team that could very well be competing for a Real Bowl?
That I'm on the fence. I want to say that it's for, I very, very team. They
Oh, hold up,
great
Bill. You're breaking up.
Oh,
You got like an internet.
is this better?
Yes, it's good right now.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that. But I want to believe that the hype is real. They have a very good team, a lot of talent. I just don't know if because they have had a couple of favorable matchups this year. I want to see them against a couple more top tier teams to continue that momentum before I anoint them as the quote unquote team to go through in the playoffs. But yeah, they're very talented, and I can definitely see them competing in the playoffs for sure. I just want to see a couple more bigger games out of them against bigger opponents before just say yes, they're the AFC contender. No.
Yeah, it's still like a robot staticky type thing. It didn't really cut you out that much there, but if you have anything going on, probably there's probably something with the internet. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm pretty sure they heard you there. But I do agree with you with the Bulls, man. It's just one of those things. I feel like you just kind of gotta wait and see. Like you said, they have had some matchups where I felt they should have blown the other team out, and they didn't. They barely won. And with that being said, if they can prove that they and still beat top tier teams, then maybe that they could change my mind. But it just really comes down to when they make the playoffs, because right now they are 4 games ahead of everyone else in the division. They should at this point just about win it. But you never know in the RFL. Things can flip really fast in the second half of the season, and we've seen that happen a lot throughout the history of the RFL. But like I said, just one of those things we're going to have to wait to see in the future. I think they are a tough team to beat, but yeah, I don't think that they're like one of those unbeatable top teams right now in the RFL. And of course, moving on to the last topic of the podcast, we talk about the Dreadnoughts, the other technically undefeated team in the RFL. They haven't lost an RFL game yet. They're 6-1. Lost a game due to a suspension, and that was to a auto win NFL team. And so, with that being said, the Dreadnoughts right now, a hot team. Do you think this is a team that can go from the worst team last season to the best and possibly win a Reload Bowl this year?
Well, I hope that my mic problems are fixed. I don't know if they are or not. But either way, we're just going to rock with it and see what happens. I like the Dreadnoughts. I think that they're a good team. I think that I think that they are a contender. My only concern, however, is Matt Jones. And the reason I say that is because I was watching this the last game, and I haven't seen it a whole lot, but last game against the Black Knights, I just seem to see it almost every other drive. He's sort of indecisive in the pocket. Like, he'll sit back there, and then he wants to run, and he's like, I'm not going to run, I'm going to throw it. And then, oh, no, I'm going to run. And then he stops again. And about 4 or 5 times, I think I saw that in the Black Knights, and almost every time he gave up a sack over it. So I think that if they are going to be serious contenders, he's got to be able to have a better decision-making in the pocket, because, an extra thing or two goes right for the Black Knights in that game, and we might be looking at the Black Knights as winners in that one, because it was a close game. So that's some of his inexperience, and I'm hoping that it gets better over the time, but that's my one concern before I can say they're a serious contender is, does Matt Jones sort of become a little bit more decisive as a quarterback in the pocket?
Yeah, I think the second half of the season is really going to tell, especially for the Dreadnoughts. I do like Matt Jones, and you already know my favorite team for me in the RFL is those Dreadnoughts, and I want us to succeed, especially this season after a down year of being the worst team in the RFL and having the first pick. But I do think that the Dreadnoughts, this second half is really going to determine how good of a quarterback Matt Jones is. I do kind of get what you mean about the scrambling and then decide not to, and sometimes giving up some big plays. But honestly, I would say that we have our best chance this season of making plays and winning games with Matt Jones, as opposed to Trey McBrisk and Jake McBride. Those guys, just weren't simply getting it done. You get Matt Jones out of free agency, he comes in, and I think he livens up the offense even more and keeps things alive. Not to mention, we do have ourselves a really good, solid running game. We already had that with Javonte Gilliam, and now we bring in Kirby Britt, who's been killing it also on the ground. At first, I wasn't a big fan at all of the dual back system that he was running back there, but at the end of the day, Britt is handling business, and I would like to see Gilliam get the ball a little bit more, but at the same time, they're winning games. So I do think that this is a team that will get into the playoffs this year and possibly compete for a Reload Bowl, because I just like the way that they've been playing, especially on defense as well. But with that being said, that's the end of our podcast. In terms of our topics that we cover, now we leave it up to you, the viewers. We don't got too much in here. I know this came at a different time, but if you guys have any questions that you would like to ask at this moment, we are open to answer them, and we'll try to answer them as best as we can. I will be closing this, though, however, at exactly an hour long. Right now it says on my Elgato 52 minutes, so 8 minutes right now to ask away questions. And Bill, I can't see them, so if you see anything, just read them out.
Yeah, we just have one right now. Who's playing today? The two games today are the... I just had a brain fart. Oh, yeah, the Lancers at the Desperados. That's at 6 o'clock Eastern here on YouTube. And then we have the 7:30 Twitch game, which is the Condors at Crusaders, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I just put the graphic up as well. So, yeah, you are correct about that. Those are the two games that we have today. 3 games as premier games on Saturday. And on Sunday, we have 2 games. And on Monday, 2 games. So that's the schedule for us.
Would you move the Lancers from the right side of 6 through 10 to left side 1 through 5? No.
6 through 10, 1 through 5.
He's talking about the power rankings. He's still mad that he's number 6 or whatever he is in the power
I think
rankings.
I mean, honestly, I feel like that's a good spot compared to the other teams right now. It's good that you didn't move down, from where you are now. It was a great win. Kick return definitely was huge in the final moments, but do I feel that they should be higher than where they are? Honestly, no. I think those other teams, they're going to still have to prove a lot. I mean, the Lancers are proving a lot so far this season, but we still got to see more out of them before we even put them in that top 10 category. But I mean, you guys are literally right there at 6.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I get it that it's your team and you want, you think that they're the best team, which is great. But at the end of the day, like I said before with my prediction, you guys have the 32nd ranked passing offense in a league that has a bunch of elite quarterbacks. That is just not going to get you very far. It might get you far in the regular season, but you have to be able to stop somewhat of a passing game down the line if you're going to make the playoffs. So until you have some success, and I know you have some turnovers, that's great, but just because you got turnovers doesn't mean you're not giving up touchdowns or huge chunks of gains through the air. So that's got to be limited before you're going to get moved up into a higher tier, in my opinion.
Yeah. And like Bill said, man, the playoffs is a different ball game, man. I mean, even like I said last season, talking about the Bulls, this was a team, number 1 AFC team. I think it was the number 1 team in the league, number 2 team. It was the number 2 team in the entire league, and they got straight up upsetted and wiped out by the Cougars, blown out. So I mean, like, you never know what can happen. You got to be prepared when you go to the playoffs, man. If you have any weaknesses, those will be exposed.
Yeah, and then the next question was, is the NFC South the best division in the RFL? I also don't think that's the truth either. They're up there.
Yeah, I'll say they are up there. I really would say they were up there. Still, a division that I think is hot right now is the North with the Thunderbirds, Explorers, Barons, because, I mean, those guys literally all beat each other. It's kind of the same deal over there in the South, but, I mean, you did defeat the Marshalls twice, so you're up there. And depending on how this Desperados matchup go, if they do win against the Lancers, then that kind of really spices things up, because now the Desperados moves up, and it's pretty much like the top teams those top 3 teams beat each other, and you don't know who's going to win the division. But yeah, it is. I say it's a top division up there. I wouldn't quite say it's the best yet. They still have to establish themselves, but there's been a couple of divisions that, even though they're new, that's really established themselves based off of the team and what they've done in their franchise history.
And then the next question from Junior Poteet. How do I submit a player? If you go to our website at relocationfootballleague.com, there is a tab at the top that says Become a Player. And from there, you'll have a paragraph you can read. Click the button to start application, fill out an application, and pay the one-time $5 entry fee, and you got a player in the RFL draft pool.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, Mitch. Who do you think will be the Snowhawks' toughest matchup left on the season?
Well, currently I don't have the schedule up and I can't move it because I got the game audio on blast right now, so you guys can hear Bill. So I can't check that out. Bill, if you're in a game, maybe you could check that out. But
Let me go and check out what we have here. I'm on Daddy Leagues.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I can check it on the Daily Leagues. That'll be easy. There you go.
There we go. Schedule. Okay, so we have the Tigers, Condors, Lancers, Crusaders, Barons, Explorers, Gunners, and Condors again. I don't know, man. That's a tough one.
I'll tell you what it is. It's you guys. I mean, the Explorers and Snowhawks. For guys who've been watching the RFL for a minute, that's kind of been a rivalry. Those two playing each other without, without actually being in the same division. And it's always been a great game. When the franchises first came into existence on the expansion, those teams were the top teams in the NFC. I was shocked because in Season 2, they both got eliminated in the first round that they played, which was in the divisional round. The next year after that, the Explorers, I think, the Explorers went on to play the Snowhawks. The Snowhawks were able to eliminate the Explorers in the playoffs. And then the next year, which was last year after that, the Explorers beat them and kicked them out of the playoffs. So it's been a great rivalry between those two, and that's a game I think is going to be like a really tough matchup. You got quite a few on there, but I think that is going to be the most toughest and interesting left on the season.
Yeah, to pick a team outside of my own, just because I don't want to be that guy, I'd probably actually go. Barons for sure, and then possibly the Crusaders just because of the offensive matchup. But the Barons, anytime you have another 99 overall quarterback playing against you, that's always a very tough thing to go against. So with that, would probably go the Barons. I don't see any more questions coming through.
Okay, and we've pretty much reached an hour, so I'm gonna go ahead and close it there. But appreciate you guys as always coming through. Like I said, I know that this podcast came at a different time. Guys were expecting it yesterday. I was really busy yesterday, so unfortunately I even forgot to let it be known that this podcast was going to be moved. But a good thing, Bill did that within the Discord. But anyway, for the guys who did come and show up and ask questions and, listen to the recap, big shout out to you guys as always. And with that being said, me and Bill, we're out of here. Peace.